Hey everybody, welcome back to the Nidus Anarchy series. I'm your host Adam, the CIO and co-founder of Nidus, and today we're going to be talking about a source code exposure that happened when someone from Mercedes accidentally published a private key up into a public GitHub repo. So this comes from a TechCrunch article. Originally, I was just going to kind of summarize the whole story and kind of tell you what went down and my opinions, whatever. But as I was kind of reviewing the article to talk about what's going on, there's just so much in here to unpack that I feel it's kind of best to kind of go through this and then kind of give you my commentary as we go through. So the article is on TechCrunch and it says, how a mistakenly published password exposed Mercedes-Benz source code. Mercedes-Benz accidentally exposed a trove of internal data after leaving private key online that gave unrestricted access to the company's source code, according to the security research firm that discovered it. So what they're saying is, someone accidentally left a private key buried away somewhere in their source code and then uploaded the source code into a public GitHub repo. So therefore, right, so a public GitHub repo means that anyone in the internet can read everything that's in there. They can view all the source code. So what happens is they accidentally left a private key, and you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to save those as environment variables or check them out of a vault of some kind, like Secrets Manager or HashiCorp, something like that. But these guys just hard-coded it, most likely dev work or, bad coding, who knows. So that's where we are there. Now, let's continue on with our article, because this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. Subham Mittal, co-founder and chief technology officer at Red Hat Labs, alerted TechCrunch to the exposure and asked for help in disclosing to the car maker. All right, let's just stop right there. So I'm not buying this, that the security research firm found a private key that exposed massive amounts of information, and they had no idea how to reach out to Mercedes and let them know. So what they did is they reached out to a news publication and said, hey, I need your help. I think they're going for publicity here, and I'm calling BS because, but hey, they got written up and I'm talking about them, so it looks like their agenda worked. But yeah, I mean, come on. If you find a massive security vulnerability like this, you don't just reach out to the news and say, hey, guess what I found? Like, that is not how you do this. And every research firm knows the proper techniques for disclosing vulnerabilities that are found. This is obviously one of them, and it is not to tell the news. So let's carry on. The London-based cybersecurity company said it discovered a Mercedes employee's authentication token in a public GitHub repo during a routine internet scan in January. Another red alert. Okay, so first, just like I said, they found their access key, which means that if you have that key, you could then take that key and log into their cloud or whatever it is that they had access to with that key as that person, have access, just like them, to whatever they had. Now, what's interesting here is that they said that the authentication token during a routine internet scan in January. So what they're saying is they routinely scan all of the public GitHub repos looking for private keys and possibly other vulnerabilities. I'm sure they do, but that is a black hat move, because a white hat move is you have something that you're trying to secure. A gray hat move is, hey, let's see if I can, mess around and do some stuff. It might be a little shady, but we're going to solve some stuff in the end, and we're going to be nice about it, and we're not going to disclose it to the world. A black hat is, let's just scan for whatever the fuck we can find. Let's find whatever vulnerability we can and exploit it to the best way that we can. Now, these guys are not exploiting it. Well, I guess, right? I'm assuming that they're a legit research firm. I've not looked them up at all, but they're not exploiting it. They're probably not going and stealing all their stuff, but they are exploiting it for attention, right? So they found this vulnerability from just scanning everything. And then from there, they reached out to the news company to say, oh, we don't know what to do. We found this crazy thing that's going to get us on headlines. And now here we are talking about it. So, but what this does, I think, highlight is what other people should really take away from this, which is super important, is that not just security research firms, but hackers, attackers, malicious people, foreign governments, whatever, are absolutely constantly scanning every public repo on the planet all day long for things like this, so that they can compromise your accounts, your servers, your software, whatever. So if you're ever developing anything and you're just like, oh, I'm just going to throw it up on this public GitHub repo, no one's ever going to see it. Forget that someone is going to see it, something, right? There are bots and just massive farms out there just scouring the internet for public code, and then ingesting it and finding vulnerabilities. So then if that code were ever to be used and they have a database in the back end to say, hey, look, we actually have the source for this thing because we got it a year and a half ago, we now know how to compromise it. So make all your repos private. That's really step one. Don't use a public repo. Unless you're making something open source or you're making something that you want to share with the world, don't use a public repo. That's one real easy way. Most enterprises don't even allow it, which I think we get into here. So according to Mattel, this token, an alternative to using a password for authentication to GitHub, could grant anyone full access to Mercedes GitHub Enterprise server, thus allowing the download of the company's private source code repositories. So this token that they got was the keys to their entire GitHub repo, which means their private GitHub repo, which may even be on-prem, not necessarily hosted in the cloud, that they could get access into that. Now, could they get access? This is where the thing is. We don't really know the details specifically, so I don't know if this is like a public repo one-off that they got the private key for so that they could then log into the private one that's hosted in the cloud, or is their private GitHub repo local, and even if you had the key, you couldn't get into it unless you're on their internet anyway. I don't know, and it doesn't really say in this article. But it is saying that this person does have access to the entire Mercedes GitHub repo. Now, obviously, people have different accounts and things. So it's not like, I doubt they have access to all of Mercedes source code for everything they've ever done. Possible, but most companies keep their stuff siloed and don't just give, God level access to everyone, and especially someone that's going to be as dumb to publish the private key on a public GitHub repo. But who knows? So let's carry on. The GitHub token gave unrestricted and unmonitored access. Unmonitored? See, there's no such thing as unmonitored because everything's logged. Anyway, whatever. Let's just skip over that one. Okay. The GitHub token gave unrestricted and unmonitored, this is in quotes, access to the entire source code hosted at the internal GitHub Enterprise server, which I'll explain in a report shared by TechCrunch. So yeah, it's their internal server. So even if you had their private key, you'd have to be in their intranet to get to their source code. Is this still bad? Absolutely. But it's not as bad as the headline in the beginning of the article leads you to believe. The repositories include a large amount of intellectual property, connection strings, cloud access keys. That's bad. Blueprints, design documents, single sign-on passwords, API keys, and other critical information. Yeah, see, that is when it gets crazy. So this also tells me that they also use that key to see what was in there, right? Because how would they know what's in that private repo unless they took that private key that they found that they're just being so nice and they just happened to find, and they didn't try to exploit it. So they obviously looked into the private repo to find out what it was and what they had access to. And then once they saw what it was, they probably panicked and thought, oh, we're going to have the cops showing up at our front door. We better do the right thing. And maybe this is a cover your ass article. So who knows? But either way, let's carry on. Mattel provided TechCrunch with evidence that the exposed repositories contain Microsoft Azure and Amazon Web Service keys, a Postgres database, and Mercedes source code. It's not known if any customer data was contained within the repos. Okay, here's where we have another problem. So this guy sent TechCrunch evidence of exposed. So not only did they absolutely hack Mercedes' private repo with a key that they know they're not supposed to have into a system they know they're not supposed to be into, they then copied or took screenshots or did something to prove that they had access to it. This is how hackers work. This is the whole, I'm sending you proof to show that I got the hack done, and you don't send it to the news agency. What are they sending? What is this proof, right? I mean, they're doing the disclosure all wrong to be considered anything white hat in my opinion. But like I said, they're getting their 15 minutes of fame. TechCrunch disclosed the security issue to Mercedes on Monday. On Wednesday, Mercedes spokesperson confirmed that the company revoked the respective API token and removed the public repository immediately. We can confirm that internal source code was published on a public GitHub repo by human error. The security of our organization, products, and services is one of our top priorities. We will continue to analyze the case in our normal process. We don't know if anything else, blah, 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 blah. So that's the gist of the article. normally I just talk about, hey, this is why you don't publish private keys. This way you don't save anything. You don't hard code keys into code ever. Just don't do it. Don't ever get into the habit of ever putting any type of a key in writing anywhere. It should be locked into a vault of some kind. This is what PAM things are for. This is what the HashiCorp vault, Delinia's vault, Secrets Manager in AWS. There's all kinds of things that you could be using to store these things. And then you pull them into environment variables or throw them into memory. So they're never written down anywhere ever unless a secured, encrypted storage location. So maybe we should do a talk about password vaults, because obviously these people need to know what they are, right? But one other thing I wanted to talk about real fast is this leads me to a conversation that I had earlier on in the week, which is a reason why you use something like a GitHub repo to check in source code. A lot of these guys were talking about like, hey, why do we want to use a GitHub repo? It's just documentation, or it's just this or that or whatever. We don't want to do it. Well, a big reason is because most enterprises now employ software that will continuously internally scan the repos for things like private keys or vulnerabilities. So just because your code right now doesn't have a private key in it and has no vulnerabilities and it's perfect code and you push it up and everything's great, it doesn't mean a year from now or 2 years from now a vulnerability is going to be found in one of the libraries that you imported or whatever, and then they know, oh crap, now this software that's public facing has a known vulnerability in it. They can be alerted on it the second that they find that CVE gets published, right? And then as soon as that CVE is published, they can patch it and push out source code because they get alerted in real time. My chair is slowly dying. As you're watching me, I might be shrinking. That's because I need a new chair. But sorry to digress. That's the whole point of that, is that if you are using GitHub, it's a good point to have systems in place to routinely scan so things like this don't happen. I'm sure Mercedes has stuff like that in place, but like the article said, it looks like this guy accidentally published code to the wrong repo. Who knows? Maybe he just, I don't know how. Maybe he accidentally copied and pasted it into the wrong folder and just pushed the changes up. Who knows what the details are? But either way, not a good day for Mercedes, and I think that this disclosure was done not properly, in my opinion. So I just wanted to throw that one out there. That's about it. Lesson of the day: don't publish private keys. Don't hard code them. That's just dumb. I'll see you guys around later.